Hello everyone, good afternoon. We're happy to be here today representing New Blue Party of Ontario members and supporters at Queen's Park. It is our party's first time using the media studio, and we're going to take the opportunity to go over our successes in the last year and our focus for the rest of the session until the election on June 2nd. I take nothing for granted in here, and despite the challenges of the last 4 years, it has been truly an honor to represent the people of Cambridge in this House of Democracy. Since I was removed from the PC caucus and my team from the party, we have worked hard to develop a party, the New Blue Party. And so when I enter Queen's Park, I feel I have a dual role as representing the people of the riding of Cambridge, but also representing those across Ontario who feel totally left out of the democratic process and out of step with the establishment parties, who all believe in the same thing and are governed by one motivation: to cut deal after deal after deal with one another. The New Blue Party serves as the only true opposition to this Ford PC government. The establishment parties seem focused on criticizing the government, not in opposition, but in a hurry up, you should spend more, faster than you are. And that really isn't opposition. That's enabling. And while some of the independents have challenged the government on lockdowns and mandates, of course, some independents like Randy Hillier don't show up for work, but I will commend Roman Baber for his anti-mandate position. The difference is we challenge the government as actual opposition, not enablers, and on more than just COVID policy. And that leaves us in a different, unique place than everyone else. Of course, we're also different because Jim and I and our members and supporters don't expect or dream of the day we may one day again be embraced or accepted into an establishment party. We're more concerned with replacing them. And we're proud as a party to have stood up for Cambridge residents against this government, overlooking community feedback, holding them to account for allowing the City of Cambridge to move ahead with items such as a drug injection site against the wishes of the community, or an Amazon facility without any proper consultation with Blair residents. I have supported local businesses, constituents, and our local hospital with one-on-one meetings and helped facilitate the impact of government programs and changes in the law from before becoming a New Blue member. At Queen's Park, I was the only current or former PC member of provincial parliament to vote against Doug Ford's undemocratic lockdown bill that has kept emergency orders in place for almost 2 years and which haven't done a thing to stop the spread of COVID-19. And increasingly, it looks like we were on the right side of history on that one. We've worked hard to do the following: challenging the Ford PCs for continuing the fiscally irresponsible record of the McGuinty-Wynne Liberals, and that's excluding COVID-19 spending. And this has been confirmed by a study in the Fraser Institute. Voting and debating against all of the Ford PC government's failed COVID-19 related policies that try to control the lives of Ontarians while costing them their jobs and businesses without stopping the spread of COVID-19. Standing up against COVID-19 vaccine passports, which have created a two-tier society. Advocating for legislation and fines to ban the use of COVID-19 vaccine passports. Defending places of worship shut down by this government. Defending parents and their children who are banned from public facilities and sporting events due to illogical government policies that are supposed to but are not containing the spread of COVID-19. Leading the charge against Bill 12, which mandated COVID-19 vaccination on employees in healthcare and education. Stopping the Ford PC government's attack on freedom of religion in their attempt to create, for the first time ever, a code of conduct that would allow for the revocation of licenses for marriage officiants. Raising attention to public recommendations provided to the Ford PCs to implement government-mandated diversity quotas for the boards and management teams of every single publicly traded company in Ontario that would have resulted in a decline in all investment holdings. Bill 150, my private member's bill, and fighting against taxpayer subsidization of political parties. Now I'm going to turn it over to Jim, and he will touch on priorities for the rest of the session, and he will be available to take your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. It's actually my first time at Queen's Park since struggling with osteosarcoma, and I'm really glad to be able to drive down here and come down here and stand on both legs, because 40, 50 years ago, people weren't as lucky. As we know, Terry Fox lost his leg in his life. And I got to say first, before we get into the details of the priorities, how proud I am of Belinda. We had a struggle at home with my health situation last year, and Belinda was able to come to Queen's Park, take every opportunity she had to ask questions, make statements, debate bills, and she has shown that despite what the establishment politicians want to tell Ontarians, that the power of one MPP to influence and make change. With the support of thousands and thousands across Ontario, putting pressure on establishment MPPs, Belinda showed that if you go to work and you challenge the government, not enable, but actually challenge the government, that you can change the narrative and change the course. And that's what we're going to do and focus on in the rest of the session. And that's what's going to lead us into the next election. I plan to be here after the next election with more new blue MPPs. And if all goes well, Doug Ford won't be here, and many PC MPPs won't be back. And so we can really summarize from the New Blue Party's perspective our priorities for the rest of the session. It really boils down to basically one thing. The other establishment parties in here, after we've become fifth in size, the other establishment parties, they all agree. They're all in agreement with one another, and the media oftentimes misses the fact that they're cutting deals with each other. And we're going to expose the fact that they're all in agreement, and we're going to expose the secret deals they got going on behind them. That's as clear as day if you read the legislation, but the media oftentimes misses it. And we don't know why, but they miss it. And Belinda ran through the list of a lot of the things she's been able to challenge just in the last year. And we're going to keep doing that for the rest of the session. It's a shame that Belinda doesn't have another private member's bill opportunity, but we're going to use every opportunity when we strategize, asking questions, making statements. We're going to look at petitions that are being brought forward by concerned Ontarians. We're going to use every tool to challenge this Ford government, because the NDP and the Liberals are following in the footsteps of enabling the Ford PC government. It is not opposition to stand up in the legislature and say, we don't like what you're doing because you're not spending enough or you're not going fast enough. They're basically telling Ontarians that Doug Ford and the PC government's on the right track. They just got to do it a little faster and a little harder. That is not opposition. That is enabling. Belinda on her own is the only comprehensive opposition to this government. Roman's done a great job. He's taken the idea that we've been advocating for to make it illegal to discriminate against employees on their COVID vaccine passport status, put in a private member's bill. It's unfortunate Belinda didn't have another opportunity. His bill doesn't go far enough, but he had Belinda there to support him. And we will keep supporting Roman on his bill, even though Roman believes it's not going to work, because he's clearly said repeatedly that private members' bills don't work and they don't pass. But that's not the point. The point is, one or two MPPs can put pressure. It's too bad Roman Baber doesn't offer comprehensive opposition on other items that are not COVID related. It's too bad that Randy Hillier has a deal with the PCs and MPP Calandra gifted him a vacation from coming to work. And it's too bad Rick Nichols, after 10 years, can't figure out what side he's on. Can't figure it out. So before we get into the priorities, I just wanted to clarify 4 things that media may have missed in the last year. Some of the deals that were not reported that Belinda touched on. And I think it's important that we talk about them. The first one that I want to talk about is how disappointing and outright disgusting it is that this Ford PC government decided mid-2021 to bring back that taxpayer subsidy for establishment political parties, 40% higher than it was before, to give the establishment political parties millions of dollars from the taxpayer. They've sucked over $100 million out of taxpayers to fund the operations of the PC party, the Liberals, and the NDP. Not to do constituency work, not to do legislative work, but to fund their political operations and pay strategists and consultants that put together fancy platforms that they never implement. Over $100 million, and the Ford PC government, after saying they were going to get rid of it, they brought it back, this liberal taxpayer scheme. But they didn't just stop there. Despite the fact that they claim to have an issue with MPP Randy Hillier's advocacy against lockdown and mandates, despite the fact that they claim MPP Hillier is spreading misinformation or disinformation, they extended the per vote subsidy to Mr. Hillier. And so Mr. Hillier now has an independent riding association where he can issue government-approved tax receipts for donations, and he gets a per vote subsidy. Belinda was left out of that legislation because she had the courage and the conviction to start her own political party. And this government deemed it equitable to say if you start a new party representing thousands, you don't get a taxpayer subsidy. But if you're an independent or an establishment political party, you get it. And despite the fact that they say that they don't approve of what Mr. Hillier's doing, they give him this taxpayer subsidy, and then Mr. Hillier heads to Ottawa for the protest, encourages reckless behavior, encourages the leaders of the protest to negotiate with Mayor Watson. The Ford PC government, we're led to believe, had no idea that the Premier's first Chief of Staff, Dean French, was there as a liaison between the protesters and Mayor Watson. And then Randy Hillier blows the whistle on the protesters after encouraging them to negotiate. He blows the whistle, making any kind of smooth transition out of the protest virtually impossible. They sabotaged the exit, and for what? So the Ford PC government could call them occupiers, can call them illegal protesters, and could throw the book at them and ultimately shut down 39 trucking businesses. That is called taxpayer-funded spin and disinformation. And it's a shame. It really is a shame that the media hasn't gotten that story right. Because if the Ford PC government really wanted to say this was wrong, they would do the obvious thing. They would cut the per vote subsidy of taxpayer money for independents and for all the establishment political parties. That per vote subsidy is totally undemocratic. It keeps the powerful in a power position. It makes it harder for new parties to break through. But despite the deck is stacked against us, we keep building, and the New Blue Party keeps building, and we're getting ready for June. And we're going to keep bringing up this taxpayer funding of the establishment parties and the nefarious deals that they're cutting in the back with independent MPPs for the rest of the session, because it's a detriment to the democratic process in this chamber. Number two, I also wanted to talk about what Belinda said, another deal that was not reported by the media. That marital code of conduct that the PCs tried to sneak in a bill about small business in late 2020. That marital code of conduct, we blew the whistle on it. Belinda spoke about it in the legislature, and the PCs pulled it. But in the same bill was the PCs granting a Christian college the right to grant degrees. And the NDP and the Liberals, if you look back at the steps in the stream of events, they said nothing about Canada Christian College getting degree granting status. They said nothing until Belinda blew the whistle on the marital code of conduct. It was only the next day, after we blew the whistle and thousands of supporters were upset on the attack of freedom of religion, then the Liberals and the NDP came forward to criticize the PC government on that granting degree power for Canada Christian College. And if you look back at the timeline, it's very, very clear. The three establishment parties had a deal. The PCs gave the NDP and the Liberals the power for a code of conduct to regulate marriage officiants in this province for the first time ever. And in exchange, the Liberals and the NDP said they were going to stay quiet on the degree granting status for Canada Christian College. When we blew the whistle on one side of the deal, the Liberals and the NDP blew the whistle on the other. Those kinds of deals are what are undermining the democratic process in Ontario, and we're going to keep talking about it. We're going to keep talking about it. Those are just two of the things. The third thing the media didn't cover is the fact that Belinda led the charge against Bill 12, mandatory vaccinations. PC MPPs were going to vote in favor of it. It is really too bad that Roman Baber and Randy Hillier said there was no point of showing up to work and speaking against that bill and voting against that bill. It's really a shame that they think private members' bills don't matter, but it was really close to passing. PC MPPs were defending mandatory vaccination, and because of the courage of Belinda in here and the support from thousands across Ontario, she turned the tide, and we pressured the PC MPPs to defeat that bill. Didn't get a peep out of the media out of that one. Didn't get a peep. Those are just three of the examples of the deals that are being cut here because the establishment parties are all in agreements and all in a cahoots with one another. We know that Doug Ford's in the pocket of Justin Trudeau. We know the Ontario PC Party is just another wing of the federal Liberal Party. And now we're going to keep talking about how they get along with the Liberals and the NDP. And a lot of the yelling and screaming down here is just theater to let people know that, you know, they're talking and they're debating when underneath everything, they agree on everything. The fourth thing I'll let you guys know is that the media has reported that there's other new political parties. It's not just the New Blue. In fact, the media spends more time talking about the Ontario Last Party that never got registered and supposedly Rick Nichols being part of a new party, and they don't talk about the New Blue Party. Well, we got to set the record straight on that one. Randy Hillier is not a member of a political party. He's an independent who gets a per-vote taxpayer subsidy from the government. And Rick Nichols, I looked last night, guys. And Rick Nichols, despite the fact that he says he's in a political party, the legislative website at Queen's Park still calls him an independent. And, you know, what's so frustrating is a 10-year guy like Rick Nichols, you know, you'd think he'd be able to get the deception down right when he tells the media and he tells Ontarians he's in a political party, and yet he doesn't even change his status on the legislative website. So the New Blue Party is the only other party outside of the four establishment parties in this legislature, represented by Belinda, and in June represented by more MPPs, and we're going to keep holding the Ford PC government to account. So what are we going to hold them to account on? Bill 195, the lockdown bill, is still in place. Doug Ford now is trying to pretend he's a conservative, that he's right of center. He says he's against passports and mandates, but he is allowing Bill 195 to stay in place. We're going to keep pushing until this government scraps Bill 195 and goes back to the old way emergencies were handled, 30-day increments with a vote and debate on the state of emergency, not allowing emergency measures to stay in place after a state of emergency is over. We're also going to talk about the fact and push, as Belinda said, every opportunity and every debate that allowing employers to have a choice to implement a COVID vaccine passport or not, or facility operators, whether in the public or private sector, is discrimination, and it has to stop. And we need legislation and fines to be put forward to ban the use of those passports. Saying it's an option is not enough. It doesn't go far enough, which is why we think Roman Baber's idea in his bill needs to be expanded on. Those are two key things. We're going to talk about the fact that the Ford PC government hasn't provided tax relief in 4 years, has carried the biggest budget deficits in Ontario history, and that's pre-COVID. That's excluding COVID spending and before COVID even hit. The biggest budget deficits. And, you know, today we're going to review the report that came out today. But look, when you're projecting historic deficits, it's not anything to brag about to say your deficit isn't as big as you thought. We're going to talk about the fact that they haven't issued hydro relief, reduction in hydro rates, another broken promise. Belinda's going to take every opportunity. In fact, they're putting up the largest wind turbine project in Ontario's history. This is under the Ford PC government's watch. Those are three things that we're going to talk about. And you know, the other two things we're going to talk about is we're going to remind voters that despite the fact that they think it's okay in this legislative chamber to funnel over $100 million of taxpayer money to the establishment political parties and to have Elections Ontario rules that micromanage every aspect of the political process, the PCs, the Liberals, and the NDP don't think it's a problem that in Ontario we do not have laws against voter fraud taking place in internal party elections. And Belinda put that bill forward, her first private member's bill, in 2019 when she was still part of the PC party. And what did the PCs do? They parked it in committee and killed the anti-voter fraud bill. I don't know any Ontarian that thinks it's okay that we don't have any laws against voter fraud in internal party elections in this province. The only people that think it's okay are the people that sit in the PC, Liberal, and NDP caucuses who said nothing that that bill didn't get debated in the committee, didn't get brought back for third reading, nothing. They killed it when they reset the legislature, and unfortunately, Belinda doesn't have any more private members' bills left, and unfortunately, the other independents aren't interested in opposing the government so they could present it forward. We're going to talk about that, and then we're going to talk about the fact that this government gave the Toronto Star the first online gambling license in Ontario. The Toronto Star is going bankrupt. They can't sell newspapers. They need another revenue source. The money that Justin Trudeau is giving the establishment media is not enough. So somehow they convinced the Ford PC government, they somehow convinced a conservative government, supposed conservative government, to grant them an online gambling license so they can push their left-wing journalism funded by online gambling revenues. And it's not getting reported. The opposition doesn't have a problem with it because they're not the opposition, they're enablers. And we're going to talk about that. So those are some of our priorities for the rest of the session. We're going to use Belinda's opportunities in question period and in member statements. We're going to look at petitions that are brought forward to represent Ontarians, to let them know the best is yet to come. And in June, if all goes well, there's going to be more new blue MPPs in here and a lot less PC MPPs. So thank you very much for having me today.
It's okay if I start things off?
Oh, sure.
Lovely. Okay, Jim, these claims about Randy Hillier and the Ottawa protests, you've laid out your case here, and Belinda did the other day in the chamber. It sounds mostly like theorizing to me, though. I didn't hear anything from you that directly or factually links Dean French's involvement to Hillier. So I'm wondering if you have any factual evidence or, so to say, receipts that prove Hillier was acting on behalf of the Ford government at these protests, as Belinda said the other day and as you seem to have said today.
So they're secret deals for a reason. They don't publicize them and say, here's the deal that we have. I find it hard to believe that Dean French tried to insert himself as a negotiator between Mayor Watson and the trucker protest leadership. And the Ford government, you want me to believe the Ford government didn't know anything about it? And the Premier said, I don't know what Dean French is doing? That doesn't pass the sniff test. That doesn't pass the test of any possibility or plausibility. The second thing is, I didn't say that Randy Hillier was there on instructions of the Ford government. I said, despite the fact that he's been doing aggressive anti-lockdown behavior for over a year, the Ford government cut a deal with him, and Randy admitted it in interviews to independent journalists, that he negotiated in the back with these guys, and they changed the legislation and introduced a per vote subsidy for Randy specifically, for an independent MPP. And in that legislation, they didn't extend that right for a per vote subsidy to a new party, to Belinda, just for Randy. And then Roman was able to get on it because he was kicked out as well. So what I'm saying is, if the government has a problem with what Randy Hillier is doing outside the legislature, why'd they give him the per vote subsidy? Why are they funding his actions with taxpayer money? That's what I'm saying. That is their way of saying we are happy with Randy Hillier, with what Randy Hillier is doing, and we're going to keep funding him with taxpayer money to do that.
And there's another federal conservative leadership race. It wasn't as fruitful a venture for you last time around as I'm sure you would have wanted. Have you looked into throwing your hat back in the ring?
My focus is entirely on the New Blue Party. Unlike politicians like Derek Sloan, for example, who 1 minute is starting a federal party that never gets registered, another minute says he's leading a provincial party, but then tells the media he's not running in the next election. I got to say, Derek Sloan's the only guy who's running for premier and prime minister at the same time, apparently. We're focused on the New Blue Party. We've been working on it for a year and a half, and that's what we're going to stick to, because when we make commitments, we stick to them. I'll say the last conservative leadership race was actually fruitful. It was a shame that thousands of conservative members got robbed in that leadership. They donated hundreds of thousands of dollars to my campaign and millions of dollars to the other campaigns. And I was in third place and on the verge of surpassing Erin O'Toole. And they removed me from the race, tried to defame me and destroy me in the media. And I won in court. And they removed me a second time. The second time they had no reason or justification why they removed me. And that's just another example of secret deals that are going on in the back, because Derek Sloan was never removed from that race. And his statements were much more inflammatory than mine in that leadership. But he had a deal to help Erin O'Toole and to pile on and criticize Leslyn Lewis. And I didn't take that deal. And that's why they removed me. So it was very fruitful in the sense that we realized that there are a lot more people out there in Ontario and across Canada that support what we stand for and what we say. And it was also fruitful because it exposed the players in the back who are involved with the federal party and the provincial party. They went after Belinda 2 months later. They went after our entire riding association board. Derek Sloan's riding president was sitting on the PC executive at the time and voted to kick 20 people off the Cambridge PC executive after that leadership race. And so it was very fruitful. And out of that was born the New Blue Party at the provincial level. We think we can influence federal politics in this country by focusing on provincial politics in Ontario. We've done it before with our advocacy campaigns, and we're sticking to that going forward.
Is there people on the phone?
Okay, we'll go to the phone line.
Ladies and gentlemen, as a reminder, if you have any questions, please press star 1. Your first question comes from Alan Hale with Queen's Park Today. Please go ahead.
Hi, Jim and Belinda. I was just wondering, we had the Campaign Life Coalition back in January was saying that they were all ready to throw their support behind you, and then they sort of ended up hedging between you and Randy Hillier and Derek Sloan's party, and so I think there's definitely a constituency that you guys are trying to put your finger on, but it seems like it is split between you and Randy and other people who are trying to become the conservative alternative to the PCs. How do you plan to get around that sort of splitting the vote problem? And have you had any conversations with any of these people about unifying under one banner?
So a great question, Alan. We've actually reached out, and Belinda has reached out to everyone, all the independents. And every time Belinda reaches out, whether it's Rick Nichols, whether it's Randy Hillier, whether it's me talking to Derek Sloan, these guys they've just follow up with deception. And what they're doing, Alan, these other two guys, they're not starting political parties. As much as the Toronto Star, Martin Reg Cohn, wants to write a nice spread about Randy Hillier's Ontario Last Party, Martin Reg Cohn failed to recognize that Randy Hillier's party never got registered, and it's done and it's over, and they don't even refer to the Ontario Last Party anymore. Done. So when that fell apart, Alan, they went and found Derek Sloan, and they pulled him out of a deal he had with Erin O'Toole in the federal leadership, and they brought him into Ontario politics, the controlled opposition operatives in the back that are very tight with the PC party. They weren't done with me in the leadership when they planted a spy and sabotaged my leadership race. So they brought Derek Sloan back, and they convinced him to do this venture to create confusion. And it does. The unfortunate thing, it creates a lot of confusion among Ontario voters who know that the New Blue Party is ramping up and we're working around the clock. But is there vote splitting? There's no vote splitting. Because, first of all, we've almost accomplished our goal at getting candidates in every single riding. We're almost there, Alan, and Belinda and I are both running in the next election. But Rick Nichols, he said he might end up becoming a government lobbyist one day. That's what he said. And then last week, after I kept reminding everyone that Rick and Derek won't commit to running, he said he's running. I don't buy that Rick Nichols is actually going to run in the next election. I don't buy it. And so we'll see if he actually does it, because I think he's protecting the PC party. That's what Derek Sloan and his team are up to. They refuse to meet with us because ultimately they do not want to admit to the fact that they're playing footsies with operatives in the back and that they're trying to undermine the New Blue Party because we're picking up momentum. So there's not going to be any vote splitting because Derek and Rick aren't running in the next election. Derek won't commit to running. The other thing Derek Sloan admitted is he's not going to run candidates in every riding because he's got a deal with a little party called the Stop the Sex Ed Party, which is controlled by PC operatives. He's got a deal with them, and he said if they run candidates and pick up a couple hundred votes, we're not going to run candidates the way they are. They like to spread the disinformation, Alan, that they want to talk to us, but every time we've reached out, they avoid it. They come up with a reason not to talk to us because the operatives won't let them meet and won't let them talk because those parties or fake parties, Alan, are designed to lose, and the New Blue Party is being set up to win.
Thank you for that. So I see that like Charles McVetti is hosting a conference where he's trying to get more people who are like true conservatives to run for office. I suppose if you guys already have most of your candidates lined up, you're not putting much stock in that conference, or what do you think of the idea of sort of the movement, the conservative movement, trying to find people who are more to the right of the PCs to actually get into politics? Do you think that'd be good for the movement in the long run?
These are distraction tactics designed to keep people confused and disoriented, designed to tell them, one day we'll get conservatives to run for office. Charles doesn't want anything to do with the New Blue Party. Charles is a good friend, family friend of Doug Ford's. And Charles, fundamentally, he probably blames us for the fact that deal that was cut to give him college degree granting powers fell apart. Because like I said, he was going to coast right to it, and the Liberals and the NDP didn't say anything. They didn't have a problem with it until we blew the whistle on the sellout, which was to put a code of conduct in and overrule marriage officiants and strip them of their powers. So Charles probably blames us. And Charles also publicly blames where the PC party is at, on Corey Tanake. And that's just, it's naive. And so Charles's issue with the PC government, the PC party, is that he's not getting the deals. Our issue with the PC party and the PC government is a principled one. They say that they're right of center. They say they're going to do certain things to deceive voters and get the vote from the right of center voters and donations. And then when they're in power, they sell every single principle out that they have. And so, no, Charles is not probably for the New Blue. All these guys are going to be for the New Blue after June when we deliver more than one MPP into the legislature.
No more questions on the phone line.
Yeah, lovely. I'll keep going. On that topic, like delivering more than one MPP into the legislature, any poll that I have seen does not show that it's going to happen. If we looked at the federal election, where I guess the closest party that I could equate to your own, the PPC, they had high hopes and they really rode a lot of, I guess, positive momentum, so to say, because of some of the vitriol directed at Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. They won no seats. I'm just wondering what makes you confident that either of you or any of your candidates are going to be elected? Like, what is that founded on?
Fundamentally, it's founded on our history. Because every time that's fine. But maybe you're new to this, but you should probably look at the history. Because every time they said that we were going to lose, the establishment, we won. And the way that they stopped us from winning is either by rigging a convention, which you guys won't report. You guys don't report that, the rigged convention in 2018. That was vote rigging. That happened in an internal party convention. You guys don't talk about it. Or they kick us out of races. That's not the way to defeat someone in a democratic system. And so every time they've said we're not going to win, they've had to use underhanded tactics to kick us out of races. And so our history suggests to us, in a free and fair election, we got a good shot. The other thing is, the polling is actually very strong for Belinda and Cambridge. So you should go check back at your sources with the establishment parties and ask them what the polling is. And I don't know what your polling is referring to, but I haven't seen polls with the New Blue Party on it, except for one a few months ago. In fact, I see polls with fantasy parties led by Roman Baber and fantasy parties led by Randy Hillier, parties that don't exist. So we're very confident in the long term that when we keep working on this and work harder than everyone else and lead with principle, that we're going to break through and we're going to succeed.
What if you don't? What if you don't win any seats? What if both of you are not elected again? Does the New Blue Party die? You said you're here for the long term, so what happens then? Would you consider joining up with these other parties or parties that you say don't exist? Is there a future beyond this next election if the New Blue Party does not win a seat?
We've been influential in Ontario party politics even before we had the New Blue Party and even before Belinda was elected, with our advocacy campaigns against voter fraud, against the carbon tax, exposing nefarious deals. We've been influential for the last year with the New Blue Party, and we're going to keep going. And whether there's an MPP in the legislature, 1 or 20, we're going to show that we are influential and we are changing the narrative. And as we've repeatedly shown, we're on the right side of history on this stuff. So thank you. Okay. Thank you very much. And we'll see you soon in a few weeks.